The main antagonists of each JoJo part tend to be iconic in their own right, having at least one key feature stand out more than others, be it the sheer cult of personality that was Dio, or the living enigma that is Diavolo in his stand, or even the devout patriotism of Funny Valentine, though one main villain has cemented himself in the minds of both the fans and the creator due to his strive for mundanity, this being the social and psychopathic salaryman seeking self-satisfaction through silently sectioning subsects of suburbia, Yoshikage Kira, and his stand, Killer Queen. Yoshikage Kira was a small-town serial killer and main antagonist as JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 4 Diamond is Unbreakable, appearing around the midway portion of Part 4 and retroactively shaking up both the stakes and tones of that part, along with offsetting the pre-established understanding of prior antagonists in JoJo up to that point. Though before we discuss this any deeper, we should understand the meaning behind his name and design. So the name Yoshikage Kira is a very interesting one for JoJo, as it holds within it a couple of meanings that apply to both Kira and his role in the story. Starting first with his family name, Kira, which directly translates to good luck or good fortune, which matches up very well with Kira's own endless run of luck throughout the story of Diamond is Unbreakable. This comes in the form of both him escaping capture, but also his chance encounter with Stray Cat in the Arrow. Kira is so lucky that he eventually believes himself to be favored by fortune. But besides this, his name was also selected because of the harmonious connection with the term killer or killa, given his role in the story was that he was a serial killer. And then you have the given name, Yoshikage, which was a rather uncommon masculine Japanese name, with one of the only notable examples of it being the old lord of the Fukui prefecture during the Sengoku era, Asakura Yoshikage, who was a man forced out of his peaceful life by famous figures such as Oda Nobunaga and Ieyasu Tokugawa, who during the Warring State periods came to his land to conquer it. Seeing his time was shortly approaching, Yoshikage fled his home, and while he did go into hiding, he was later betrayed by a close family member who forced him to commit seppuku, which some of these minor elements of a real-life figure might have actually been taken into account when crafting Kira's own story, though the kanji that comprises Kira's given name is slightly different than Asakura's, as it translates to lucky shadow figure or lucky figure acting within the shadows, which is not only doubling down on the luck factor involved in Kira's role in Part 4, along with Araki saying that he picked these two names because he loved the alliteration of it, but it also works very well with Kira's whole character being a secretive serial killer, using the guise of an uneventful life as a shadow to mask or cover his killings, though one of his greatest assets for covering up murder is his stand, Killer Queen. Killer Queen is a humanoid stand with cat-like features and wears an outfit comprised of a belt, glove, and boots with skull-like aesthetics on them. Killer Queen also appears to be emotionally dulled with a face that is mostly unchanging like a cat, which is done to reflect Kira's own psychopathic personality, as cats are one of the few other species that kill for sport. Araki even stated that the design was intentionally simple but extremely effective. Though that being said, Killer Queen isn't completely emotionless, as it can react to extreme distress. Along with this, it also possesses its own unique stand cry in the form of Shibama! Which can be translated to death, which makes the cry not only fitting for its user, but its ability as well, as this ability is Bomb Creation. Bomb Creation is an ability that can take a multitude of forms, but let's start with the first form, this being Bomb 1, which is baseline Killer Queen. This ability allows Kira to transmute anything that his stand touches into a bomb, no matter if it's an object or a living thing. And how this works is Killer Queen will place an explosive charge within that object, which doesn't change anything about it physically, but it will turn it into a deadly weapon, as it can be triggered in a multitude of ways, depending on what type of bomb Kira made. This can take the form of either a contact bomb, where Killer Queen will place an explosive charge into a desired object that is then stored there until it comes in contact with something or someone, much like the shock from a static electricity charge. Or Kira can create a remote detonation bomb, which is very similar to a contact bomb, but Kira decides the activation point, with Killer Queen triggering the explosive via a hand gesture that resembles activating a remote detonator. Either way, once triggered, an explosive charge will travel up the figure that came in contact with it and erupt them, creating a large explosion that obliterates the body. These bombs seem to be designed to match Kira's own desire to stay undetected and work from the shadows, where they disintegrate a whole target down to an atomic level, leaving behind no remains. Though a target can survive an explosion, this is only if they are caught in the aftershock of an eruption from something exploding next to them, as direct contact with an explosive charge will guarantee guarantee a kill. Though the physical explosion is kind of bizarre. Firstly, the explosion of Killer Queen, while depicted as a loud, fiery eruption, would seem to be completely silent. Along with this, there is no set shape or size of the bomb, as Kira can choose the size and radius of the explosion itself when he sets the charge. Along with this, he seems to choose to only have it affect living things, which leaves the area around it completely untouched. But as we see with later bombs, this is a choice actively made by Kira himself, which leads to some rather disturbing imagery when you put it all together, and perfectly matches Kira's own terrifying efficiency, even allowing him to isolate certain parts of a person to preserve when he detonates them. Though even weirder so, the first bomb also has a similar function to an incendiary bomb, as if it's operating inside of a vacuum or a space without air, the bomb's charge is disabled, leaving it a dud. And on top of that, there are some other limitations to the first bomb as well, such as if Kira or Killer Queen cannot press their thumb down to trigger the remote bomb, the activation cannot occur. And also along with this, Kira cannot have multiple first bomb charges deployed at once, meaning in order to attack again with a first bomb, he would have to detonate it, which could leave him open to danger. The first bomb also has limited range, as Kira would need to touch an object and then send it towards his target, though that failing is somewhat mitigated when Kira discovers Stray Cat and hollows out Killer Queen's abdomen to store the plant inside of it. Combining together their abilities, they can create contact or remote bombs that are invisible air bullets, giving him now terrifying range capabilities, as even though the bubbles are invisible to both Kira and his opponent, Kira has a sharp enough mind to calculate their trajectory in order to make that winning touchdown required to get his target, though he will still have the limitation of a single charge at a time for his first bomb. And while Kira can't have more than one charge active at a given time, he does have more than one bomb, which leads us to Killer Queen's second bomb and Kira's substand, Sheer Heart Attack. Sheer Heart Attack is the unbreakable substand of Killer Queen and the second bomb in Kira's arsenal, taking the shape of a remote-controlled cat skull tank that Araki designed in a way to get across the idea that it was the ultimate assassin stand, but also completely indestructible, so combining together a knife with a tank really sold the idea very well. Though, unlike Killer Queen, Sheer Heart Attack is an automatic stand, meaning that it operates under simple commands, and isn't controlled by Kira directly. Thus, he can deploy it and it will attack for itself. And the way Sheer Heart Attack functions is Killer Queen launches it from its left hand. Then Sheer Heart Attack will scan the area for heat signatures using infrared vision. Then once it's identified the hottest thing in the room, it will pounce and then erupt in a massive explosion. One that actually does affect the area around it too. And on top of that, the stand has surprisingly efficient physical abilities, being able to not only jump, speak, but cleanly cut through someone's hand without any issue. Along with this, it is physically indestructible, though the trade-off for its strength becomes its rather simple programming, as the stand can be outwitted rather easily by simply throwing out something hotter than your body temperature. I also have to imagine the Tremors 2 style of spraying yourself down with a fire extinguisher might also hide your body temperature enough that Sheer Heart Attack might not even detect you as a threat. Along with this, it will also take the most direct path towards its target, making it rather easy to outpace or outsmart where it will go. And these two bombs were all Kira had in his arsenal for a good while, until he had to go into hiding and came in contact with the stand arrow for a second time. This arrow blessed him with the ability to achieve his goal of concealing his identity from anyone who seeked it, forging the new Killer Queen third bomb, Bites the Dust, which was roughly translated back to Japanese, lose and die. Now, Killer Queen's Bites the Dust takes the form of a miniature Killer Queen that is implanted in a host like a first bomb charge, and how it functions is anyone who approaches said host and questions them about Kira's identity will activate the bomb. This causes the miniature Killer Queen to enter that person's body and causing them to explode from within with such force that rips the host back in time 1 hour prior to their encounter. Though on top of this, unless undone, Killer Queen's Bite the Dust will repeat the attack 1 hour from the reset to the unexpecting target, as if they were fated to die that way, even if the trigger is nowhere near them, though this time the attack doesn't result in a time reset. And this can be repeated as many times as the person planted with the third bomb encounters those questioning them about Kira's identity. Along with this, it can attack multiple targets at once with its ability as well if its identity is revealed. And on top of that, Bites the Dust will never allow harm to be brought towards those implanted with the ability itself, even if Kira himself tries to strike them, which leads to a few downsides of the ability. First, of course, being while active, Kira is completely in the dark on how it's going, not knowing how many times it's been used, if used at all. Along with this, if Kira himself reveals the information willingly, even if it is overheard, that won't trigger Bites the Dust. And on top of all that, while Killer Queen's Bite the Dust is activated, regular Killer Queen cannot defend Kira, as it's busy in the host of Bites the Dust, meaning that if he's attacked, he'll have to make do on his own or retrieve Killer Queen by disabling Bites the Dust, which could undo all of its effects if the effects haven't triggered yet. And finally, Kira cannot plant the third bomb into someone who is already a stand user, making it so it's kind of rather useless in stand battles. Now, thematically, Killer Queen's ability was designed to be sort of the antithesis to Crazy Diamond's, with one being needless destruction and the other being selfless restoration. And this was done to show that Kira himself somewhat represented the dark part of humanity, where Josuke was molding himself after what was the light side. And on top of this, Araki also always planned for Killer Queen to obtain all these abilities. He considered it to be the ultimate stand, but he was worried that they might be a bit too powerful, so he divided the powers throughout the story and gave them more and more weaknesses so that Kira's ability wouldn't become completely unbeatable. Now with this said, every part of Killer Queen's loadout is directly in reference to the iconic British rock band Queen, specifically 3 of their biggest songs, this being Killer Queen from the Sheer Heart Attack album, Sheer Heart Attack from the News of the World album, and Another One Bites the Dust from the Game album. And all of these songs are directly referenced in the abilities themselves. Along with this, there are big references to Kira's own character as well, starting first with Killer Queen. It would appear that the lyrics of the song directly impacted how the ability would look and act, as Freddie Mercury would sing about how explosive the titular Killer Queen is, with lines like, "She's a killer queen, gunpowder, gelatine, dynamite with the laser beams, guaranteed to blow your mind anytime." Though on top of that, the song Killer Queen is also about going after high-class prostitutes, which is somewhat the perfect target for Kira. But then you have lines like, "Drop of the hat, she's as willing as playful as a pussycat, and momentarily out of action, temporarily out of gas," which not only speaks about the design of Killer Queen being somewhat cat-like, but also temporarily out of gas plays into how Kira can only activate one charge at a time. Along with this, the song mentioning cats might be why later Kira would add a literal cat to his arsenal to improve his abilities. And then you have Sheer Heart Attack, which is a song that was originally going to appear on the album of the same name, but didn't appear until 3 albums later. Who'd have thunk? And then the song itself is about a young girl who is so attractive that she can trigger heart attacks on sight. And this works very well with the ability, as not only does Sheer Heart Attack's ability focus purely on the sight of the stand, but when it was introduced, the first person who saw it was killed. Along with that, again, much like with Killer Queen the song, this song is about a young attractive girl, which plays into Kira's own personal taste and targets, with his first target being the youngest as well. Along with this, the tempo of the song is considered to be more punk rock than the standard rock that Queen was known for, and it's reflected in the fight that this takes place in, as Sheer Heart Attack is a much more chaotic and less precise bomb than the standard Killer Queen, showing in its destruction of the environment around it. And then finally you have Bites the Dust, which again takes direct influence from the song it gets its name from, along with the song's own tone, this being Another One Bites the Dust, which is a song about a shootout, specifically the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. But when it originally started out, it was just a song about cowboy duels, and this theme is somewhat carried over into the usage within the arc, but I did a whole video covering that topic, so you should check that out. And on top of this, in a more direct way, Another One Bites the Dust is referenced through a concurrent string of deaths within the arc that it takes place in, as it's also a basic breakdown of the function as well. It's also the only Killer Queen ability that isn't tied directly to a song about a woman, because this ability was created to protect Kira instead of to pursue a target. Though Queen isn't the only English music icon that influenced Kira in some way, as Kira is seemingly inspired visually by the musical genius of David Bowie, who was a common influence for Araki's villains at the time, but Kira was originally made in the spitting image of him, having a similar facial design and seemingly taking direct influence from the early 80s Bowie, specifically around the time of his Serious Moonlight tour and during his time with his duet with Queen. That's right, Bowie is also connected to Queen in some way, as in 1981, Freddie Mercury reached out to Bowie to work with Queen on a project. Originally he was going to be utilizing a song called Cool Cat planned for the Hot Space album, though during the development they weren't really happy with how it sounded, so Queen had Bowie listen to a demo of another song, hoping that he would give them the changes they need to make it a hit, and he helped them forge the extremely popular Under Pressure. Under Pressure is also a song that lasts with Kira throughout the whole of his character, being somewhat the ultimate motif of his character's life, being a song about the looming pressure that compels us to do what we do, be it destructive or not, and Kira is suffering from a multitude of pressures throughout the course of the story of Part 4, from either the mental pressure of maintaining his mundane life, or the physical pressure of Echo's Act 3 during the Sheer Heart Attack fight, or even the pressure of having to suppress his urges to kill. And while doing this, his actions turn the lyrics abusive under pressure, almost literal, such as Kira only being able to go into hiding by splitting a family in two, where he would kill the husband and stole his identity. Along with this, you have Can't We Give Ourselves One More Chance, which might be the influence on Bites the Dust rewind ability, effectively giving Kira a second chance. Along with this, Insanity Laughs Under Pressure We're Breaking, which references to Kira's use of Bites the Dust during his escape from the Moriocho boys, letting out an insane laugh without realizing that his grand escape makes no sense, and that it had actually resulted in his own death. And finally, you have This Is Our Last Dance, This Is Ourselves, Under Pressure, Pressure, which could be in reference to the fact in Kira's final stand, he was under the pressure to escape the gang, his escape was undone by the pressure caused by Koichi's Act 3, and then finally he was finished off by the pressure of the ambulance's wheel running over his head. Though what led Kira to the point that he is at the end of Part 4? Well, it's the result of Kira trying to live what he claims to be a peaceful life, which is just a happy life without stress, which Kira has carefully crafted with his everyday processes, from how long he sleeps, to where he works, to even how much effort he's willing to put into an everyday task, willing to change up his schedule if he needs to, and erasing any nuisances from his life that prevent him from achieving these goals. Though the reason that Kira is so adamant on maintaining this life is not to draw attention to himself. This way he could pursue what he wanted most in life, murder. As every now and then, Kira would find himself overwhelmed with the desire to kill, starting first all the way back in 1983 where he snuck into the house of Rami Sugimoto, where he killed her dog and hid under her bed, and when it grew dark, Rami would hear a loud dripping noise from within her room, but she would feel at ease when her pet dog would lick her hand to ensure her that she was safe. But soon the dripping would lead her to check on the source of the noise, and she would find it. It would be blood dripping from the slit throat of her dog hanging upside down in the coat rack. The same dog she thought was under her bed the whole time. And in that moment, she heard a man's voice from under her bed comment on how her hands were silky smooth to the feel. And this threw her into a panic. Rami, in that moment, ran to the boy who was staying over the night at her house and tossed him out a window. And in this last-ditch effort, saving him from the same fate that she would meet that night, as Kira would murder her and claim his first victim. And the story that Rami tells is actually in direct reference to an old urban legend horror story called Humans Can Lick Too, or The Licked Hand, which is followed almost beat for beat, with some minor details changed along the way. Though this isn't the only influence over Kira and his killings, with another major influence being the serial killer who also only targeted women, Ted Bundy. As Kira and Bundy shared many similarities, as they both had uncontrollable dangerous urges that they hid from the world through the guise of a somewhat charismatic everyday man disguise, and they were both very good at creating identities to get by day. Along with this, they were both able to escape capture after they were originally caught by moving to a new location and taking on a second identity, but they would end up exposing themselves yet again after succumbing to those same dangerous urges. Along with this, they also both had violent tempers and exploded with rage when things got out of their control. Though two major aspects of Bundy's own persona would appear in Kira, starting first with them both happening to have a strange sexual fetish, with Bundy finding himself being drawn to more violent pornography, where he claims that it brought out these urges within him. Kira has a very similar story. Starting from the moment that he saw the Mona Lisa's hand, he had a sexual awakening, cutting out the hand from that image and keeping it in his room, which in turn led to him severing the hands of real women so that he could keep them for himself, targeting women with similar perfect hands to the Mona Lisa the same way Bundy would target women who resembled his first girlfriend that broke his heart. Then of course you have Bundy and Kira's relationships with their mothers, as not only do the two mothers look similar, but as Bundy explains, he originally was an unwanted child and his mother tried to abandon him onto another family member, but was convinced by her father to keep him, and thus she decided to raise Bundy, but now no longer as his mother, but as his estranged sister, which shattered Bundy's worldview when he uncovered the truth later in life, even though he personally claims that it did nothing. Most psychological evaluations claim that that might have been his breaking point. In a very similar light, Kira had a very strange relationship with his own mother. As Araki mentioned in a 2007 interview, he had a backstory in mind for both Kira and his father that he never showed in the manga but was always intended when he was writing, which involved Kira's mother being an extremely abusive individual and Yoshihiro Kira, his father, would turn a blind eye to it, not being able to act in life, which in turn, after his death, would be the reason why Yoshihiro is so protective of Kira, as he regretted not acting when he could, as well as establishing that, thanks to his own maternal figure in life, Kira had a very negative outlook on women as a whole. Though Araki never implemented these aspects directly into the story, story due to the tones being a bit too dark for a magazine aimed at younger readers, but he still had these ideas in mind when writing Part 4, even trying to leave hints with context in the story itself, saying in an interview that the photo of Kira's parents was supposed to be the clue to the readers that his family life was a little strange, which makes this information essentially canon in its own right. With that in mind, Kira's strive for a peaceful life would ultimately result in his undoing, though he stood strong in the face of adversity, repeating to himself his daily routine to remind himself why he is fighting and motivate himself to erase his opponent. This is why, in certain stressful situations, Kira will just start listing off information about himself, both because he's confident enough that the person that he's talking to won't be able to use that information in any way to identify him later in life because he's going to kill them, but also as a way to remind himself why he's doing what he's doing. Kira was also always willing to do anything to achieve his goals, even sacrificing his own identity to escape pursuit from the Moriocho gang, which Rocky states the exact method it was supposed to happen wasn't planned out beforehand, but he was always planning to adopt a new identity, and the way he did so was by adopting the role of Kosaku Kawajiri, which is both possibly in reference to Bundy's statement about creating new identities is rather easy, as Kira very cleanly slithered his way into the role of the father of the Kawajiri household without much issue, but also his relationship with Hayato was directly inspired by a Philip K. Dick novel, The Father Thing. Along with this, Araki also discussed the reason why he gave Kira the endgame power-up in the form of Bites the Dust the way he did, as somewhat of a play on the common shonen trend at the time, where a person who has dulled in life must develop into something great. It was an archetype that he actually used for Koichi as well, and he gave it to Kira as a way to play those two as opposing opposites, where Koichi is the first person to recommend going after Kira. Along with this, Koichi is a major factor in identifying Kira, and of course he is a key factor into Kira's own defeat. And even with everything that he sacrificed, Kira ended up being cornered, crushed, and carried away into the afterlife, all while his soul was ripped apart by the hands in the alleyway. But this wouldn't be the end for Yoshikage Kira, as due to his demise in that alleyway, he would soon find himself waking up in a Shinto-style temple, where he had lost all of his memories of who he was when he was alive, along with losing his own visual identity, now resembling the dead man he stole the body of in life. Along with this, he was now a vagabond spirit, or a ghost shackled to the world with nowhere to go. His only option was working for the monks at the temple as a spirit detective of sorts, going on missions involving rogue ghosts or paranormal activities. It is here that Kira would experience the closest thing to the peaceful life that he was always longing for, as he was now a ghost who could do more or less whatever he wanted, but still created routines of his own and worked a job only he could do in order to enjoy his life and grow as a spirit. And Araki crafted this story because he wanted to explore the concept of an afterlife and the rules that would come with being a ghost, and Kira was the perfect subject in mind to allow him to experiment with this, as it would allow him to work with a character he really enjoyed again, along with bring that slightly sympathetic aspect to Kira that the main series was lacking. And that said, Dead Man's Question is a really fun read, and I recommend anyone who hasn't read it, give it a read. But it wouldn't be the only time Araki would return to Kira in a future work in JoJo, as in Part 8, JoJolion, Yoshikage Kira would return in full form yet again as a major figure in the story, not only acting as a piece of the protagonist in the part, but also he was somewhat of a heroic twist on the serial killer known in Part 4. And the reason that Kira has gotten somewhat of a happier ending compared to most other villains in the series is because Kira is one of Araki's favorite characters in general, considering Kira to be an extremely admirable person in the way he lives his life. Minus the murder, obviously. Specifically with Araki saying that he felt Kira's willingness to list off and admit all of his quirks and weird hobbies, yet keep a calm mind and control over the situation, made Araki feel more comfortable with himself and his own quirks, even comparing Kira's measurement of his fingernails every day to Araki's own habit of measuring his blood pressure every day. And with that said, Kira is probably one of Araki's most complex characters, creating this twisted individual who shows the scariest part of a psychopath, that being their ability to blend into the background of everyday life, and how normal they can appear when observed. Araki made sure that people would understand this factor by occasionally cutting to Kira's own perspective, showing us that he is not scheming like the villains of previous parts, but enjoying a picnic or going out on an evening drive, but doing so with a severed hand. All with this intention of appearing normal, because that's what he felt like he was, which in part was a major theme of Part 4, the idea that anyone in their town can be dangerous. Araki even used a serial killer as both the opener and the closer of the part, along with saying himself that Kira and the town were what carried Part 4's story, saying in an interview that Part 4 had to end because Kira was gone. And if you enjoyed this video and want to see more videos like it in the future, I have a Patreon at patreon.com/ManyNotTheBadGuy. Patreon is a very helpful tool. It helps support the channel and keeps it flowing. And if you want to look at the Mona Lisa yourself and get a boner, well, you can do so by going to buyshimonetta.com and purchasing yourself a copy of Shimonetta, a boring world where the concept of dirty jokes doesn't exist.